You're like.
Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to this Sweetwater County Commissioners Special Meeting on Monday, November 15th. Before we get into our agenda, I'd like to notify that we have 4 commissioners present. Please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed with a moment of silence.
States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, we have one agenda item basically that's budget and strategic planning. And of course, at the end, we'll talk about scheduling future meetings and that, see if we can't get things scheduled out from there. But I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
So moved by Commissioner Smith. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Tolman. Now, any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Also, I would entertain a motion to suspend Robert's rules.
So move.
Moved by Commissioner Lloyd. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Smith. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign, motion carries. With that, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Lloyd at this time. Floor is yours, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chairman Wendling. So what we were charged with was to put a committee together and start to take a look at the questions we asked the outside entities for a couple of reasons: to help get a picture, make sure we're asking the questions we need to have a better picture of why they're making the requests, what they're requesting. There's a hope to eventually to get to some scoring criteria. We're still working toward that. And then the third part was to make it a more manageable form. Commissioner Tolman had talked a little bit about how it's a lot of narrative. Could we create some checklists and such like that? So we've actually met today for it was our 3rd meeting since we met 2 weeks ago, and we're charged with this. So this group's worked pretty well to move forward. That group's been myself, Commissioner Tolman, Bonnie Berry, Attorney John De Leon, and Christina Marshall. And I think the combination of the 5 of us have been really good to take a look at. So and bring different perspectives of what we need to ask. And so one of the things as we started talking about looking and deciding what information we need is it's really in the questions we ask, and to make sure we have the information we need as commissioners to make the best decision on how we fund, who we fund, and how we should. And we try to create it into a format that was a little more user-friendly. What you see in front of you is our first draft that was actually our second draft, because our first draft was sent last night at about 11 o'clock to the group. And then we did some reductions and redactions from our discussion today. And I didn't bring it, but the old form will still be the first form. And with just a couple changes, we had on there, when was your organization started? I don't think that's vital for us to know if we're funding them. So we asked for this year's request, but we're asking them to put on the form last year's award. First, I actually had last year's request, but the request could be different than what their award was. So we actually have that information fairly quickly. And then I'm going to ask Attorney De Leon to explain this a little bit, because one of the conversations we had was statutes and who we can fund outside. And one of the questions was, and John, how did you phrase that to our group specifically of when we're giving money, we have to know how it meets to the mission of the county, or how was that phrased, how you put that?
Yeah, just that it serves a public purpose.
Yes. So we wanted to kind of make that first question is, what is your organizational mission and what services do you provide to the citizens of Sweetwater County? So we could show that public purpose, which is actually part of the statute. We won't use the set current page 2, and then the next section would look like this. And what I thought we could do is, what I'm hoping from Commissioner Smith and Commissioner Wendling, and then of course Commissioner Tillman, but she's already kind of looked through this form with us too. Are we missing any questions that we need to know? Can we reduce some of the questions? As you see, we've kind of made it in a really simple check mark type of format. This is done in Microsoft Word. I do think this format would be much better in Excel and an actual fillable spreadsheet, except I started going with this idea at about 10 o'clock last night and was too lazy to honestly go to an Excel spreadsheet and just rolled with a chart format. So the first question we ask is your agency housed in a county-owned building? Then we have, is the county paying utilities for your organization? One of the new questions we asked is the county providing internet community computer services to your organization? What we're trying to get in these questions is for people to stop and think that outside of the financial dollars we're giving to them, there are a lot of in-kind dollars we're providing to a lot of these entities based upon rent, utilities, maintenance, internet usage. Is the county providing maintenance, snow removal, and cleaning services for your agency? We asked the total annual salary for your agency's director, bonuses provided to your agency director. And then some of the old questions too, is your agency proposing any salary increases this year? If so, how much of an increase, total dollar amount of the raises? Then percent of the raises and total dollar amount coming directly from county funding. And I think that's an interesting question, because I know a couple of years ago, we cut folks that were giving their organizations raises. And one of the organizations that it did affect was Southwest Counseling, but they get only like 5 or 6% of their total funding from us. So how much of that was really going to raises was different. But we're going to ask how much of it, the money you're putting to raises, come from your funds that you're creating, and how much are coming from our funds? Because I think that's an important question based upon, I don't want outside agencies we're giving money, giving employees raises more than we're giving our own employees. We should start there. Some of that is your agency considering bonuses or incentives to this year's total dollar amount? Percentage of the bonuses and their incentives and total dollar amount coming directly from the county? Any total anticipated salary increases due to promotions and longevity raises? Is your organization a pass-through grant sponsored, managed, assisted by the county? And how much is the grant award? And then please write each grant and amount use and additional pages needed. This is another one of those. And then we do follow up. Do you receive any other grant funding? The reason we want to differentiate the two is, once again, if we are sponsoring it, managing, or assisting it, we're once again using county resources to help the organization out to be successful. And we want to discriminate that to show some of that extra funding we're actually giving that's unanticipated and unaccounted for. Does your agency anticipate receiving any grant funding? And what we kind of start to go towards, so when we get to some of the narrative questions, is we want to know that organizations are looking for alternative funding outside of what the county is providing. In fact, when we get to some of the last questions, you'll see a question: what's your sustainability plan? How would you provide funding if we couldn't provide the amount of funding? And we want people thinking about those things. Does your organization have or receive money from a foundation? And if so, how much does that foundation have? How much is restricted and how much is unrestricted? And that would be the restricted plus the unrestricted equals total amount a foundation has, because Bonnie says a lot of organizations struggle with the difference in that amount. And the reason we think it's important to know what foundations have is, even though it's not part of the entity, they still can receive money from that. For example, there was an organization last year that has a sister type organization in the state. We hit in the county, and we hit them pretty hard with their cash on hand. And one of their arguments was, hey, this organization, which is similar to us, they have a foundation. So when they do fundraising, they put all the money into the foundation. We don't have a foundation. So it looks like we have a lot of cash on hand, but here's why. The next question we ask is, how much cash on hand does your organization have? But we're also asking the question, how is your cash on hand utilized? Are any of your reserves being saved for a capital project? Last year, when Star shared with us during the meeting, hey, we've built this money up because we're trying to get this grant through YDOT to purchase a bigger building and be able to house our own buses. And also, Golden Hour, they run out of grant money for their funding for food in September. So they have to dip quite a bit into their cash on hand every year to continue to provide the fooding money. So if they do have a lot of cash on hand, we want to know if they actually have productive reasons or reasons, or are we just hoarding and growing a savings account using the county money? We want to be able to differentiate that. We want to know, do you have a county commissioner appointed board or a self-appointed board? And do you participate in any of the county-based benefit packages, insurance, retirement, et cetera? Any questions on that? Is there anything seem redundant? Are we missing anything in those sections?
I would ask, so you ask just for clarification, I'm sure people are going to be confused about this, especially if they don't read all the way through, but
Yeah,
into the first page, your agency proposing any salary increases this year, so it's not much. But then on the next page, you kind of break it down. So is your agency considering bonuses, percentage of bonuses, and then total anticipated salary increases due to promotions, longevity. So,
Okay.
so I'm sure they're going to say, okay, yeah, we're going to do $10,000 on this first question, but then that is $3,000 of bonuses, $3,000 for this guy who's been here a long time, and just,
yeah.
so it's like, okay, do you want the total and then let's break it down, or
Yeah.
is this like separate?
Okay, no, that makes a lot of sense, and we can definitely do that. So,
Everything else looks good.
okay, any questions? Chairman Wendling?
Yeah, just a couple things. I think it'd be interesting to know if they have any user fees for facilities. As you know, I can think of specifically events complex. Do they charge user fees? Does it cover all their expenses
Mhm.
of when that facility is being used?
No, I think that's a great question. That also rolls over to the senior center.
There you go.
And
Very
the
well.
library. So there are some options there.
I mean, they could be rolled under
Mhm.
additional revenue, but I think in some cases, when we start looking towards the opportunity to become self-sufficient, they may have to raise their user fees.
Nope, I agree with that.
Okay.
So the next section, one of the things I think that the
Wait,
county
hold
is.
on. I have a question.
Oh, there you are, Lauren.
Oh,
You're on. I'm
hey,
sorry.
Lauren,
on.
I will email since you're here.
I was going to ask that. And then I also had a question around definitions of some of these things, because I know when we did our grant applications, there was always a question of exactly what does that mean, or what's the definition around that. And I'd be willing to help with any of that if needed. But I think definitions, and I can go through and look at what, what's a user fee? What is, a raise look like? What, anything like that we need to define out. And then my other question is there going to be a set way to evaluate the responses on this? I know with a lot of grant applications, it's a weighted value or something like that takes out a little bit of the personality opinion of, well, I like this, I like this purpose, or I like what they're doing for the community. And so I want them to get, that's important to me personally, but maybe that doesn't fall necessarily under what, the county goals are, or our mission, or, what we're working towards. And so I think that it's important to try to figure out a way to remove not all the personal opinions, because that's why we're elected officials, but to really look at it across the board, so we have a level playing field for all of our agencies and entities.
And Commissioner Sandfield, and we're hoping we can discriminate that out with some of the questions. And as we go through this process, one of our final steps will be trying to find some way to create rubrics and numbers and ratings. And I think before we get there, we have to get to what questions have to be asked to disseminate that, then figure out how to weight it and score the questions. So that's definitely something we're working toward. It was something we talked about at the last meeting too, and I know you were unable to make that, but it was, how do we create a system that takes some of the subjectivity out of it and create more objectivity. So that is something we're actually working forward to, but we thought we would start by creating the questions and then working backwards from there.
Perfect.
Mary.
Thank you.
Well, yes, Commissioner Shanefield, Bonnie said maybe she could help us develop a spreadsheet that would be a checklist of some of the key questions. So we would have for our use, we would be able to compare the different entities with or without the name attached.
Compiling it all.
That sounds great. Thank you.
And
I got your email,
Okay,
Commissioner.
yeah. So, and kind of what you're seeing is just our first rough draft after We've been able to meet 3 times in the last 2 weeks. I'm not going to lie and say we didn't college procrastinate and have the last meeting an hour ago, but we are working diligently to make some progress. And I really think we have already made some good strides. So the next session was based upon the fact, I think one of the things the county that has done is really well is become more efficient. No, sorry, I jumped a section. So the next one is more about what population are you serving? So we asked the question, total number of people your organization serves, average for year, number for year, total for month, and then number of people your organization serves that are under the 200% poverty level. That's a question we can keep. That would be more of a discussion question. Then there was one other question. You'll see the blank box, but I had a question there to say, how many people have left your services? Or, the question is, do we ask a question, how many, maybe in the next section, which you'll see, how many people did you serve 3 years ago? How many people did you serve 1 year ago? How many people have you served 0 years, currently? With the concept to see how much are organizations growing? Are they shortening? But then giving them an opportunity to explain why. And a great example of that could be the senior center, because their numbers are going to be lower last year because there have been limitations. But giving people the chance to explain. But I think knowing how many people the service affects directly and those things, I think, is an important concept. And so the question I would have for the commission is, do we think it's important to know how many are under what the federal definition of the current poverty level is, the 200% of poverty level? So they look for federal programs. Do we think that's an important question? And 2, do we think it's important to track the numbers served over the last 3 or 4 years? Yes, Mary.
On that last section of how many employees, I would just say how many full-time employees, 1, 3, and 5 years, and
Yeah.
how many part-time employees.
Yeah, and we just jumped ahead a section, Mary. So 1 sec. So on the number of people served, and then we can lead off with that.
Okay.
What do you think? Do we need to have a comparison of how many people we're serving? Do we need to know that? Do we need to know if they're serving a lower population at 200%? What are you guys' thoughts?
I think I'd be careful, like with the poverty. That's a great question, but is it the only or the most important standard that we have?
Right, I agree.
Maybe the senior center, isn't serving people in poverty, but they serve a lot, and it's kind of a vulnerable population. There's a lot of other criteria, and so I'm not opposed to the question, but maybe there's some others as well that maybe we should ask.
And if there
What
are
about-
other questions we ask, go ahead, Lauren.
What about just saying a vulnerable population and then ask for them to describe what populations that is? Because, they could break down, 20% of our population served is low income, 20% are elderly, 20%, whatever that may be, and give them the opportunity to sound that out.
Any others? With that being said, do we also think it's important to have a comparison of numbers served over the last 2 or 3 years?
I think, another one. So like Wyoming, they serve, but then they,
Mhm.
success is sending them on their way and them getting out of the program. So
Mhm.
that's, if we say, oh, you're serving fewer people now, but that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
So, it'd be hard. I don't know.
And COVID's gonna skew that.
That is going to skew
Mhm.
this.
So-
I don't know. I mean,
Okay. Anyone else have an opinion on that?
I think if you look in regular times outside of COVID, it is important because that kind of shows you the direction that their organization is going towards services or people served. I mean, it can be a telltale sign. I know with Big Brothers, Big Sisters, we saw a decline in the program, and that really made us look at did they fit under our mission? Were we hindering them moving forward? And they actually moved out to another organization and were more successful because they didn't fit the WISE mission. And so I think there's a lot that can be weighed in that. And maybe that's not necessarily our place, for the strategic planning portion of that, but it gives us a direction of where they're headed.
Chairman Wendling, do you have an opinion on it? Okay.
I can see it both ways.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Up next is a section where one of the things I think we've done well as a county is we've become more efficient. If you look at the numbers of FTEs over the last 10 years, we're significantly down. And even if you look at the last 2 years specifically, we're down 20 employees. So we kind of want to know how other organizations have become more efficient. So, and what Commissioner Tolman was saying, and we talked about this downstairs, was The question is, what were your full-time employees and the numbers? And the second question is, what is your part-time employee numbers? 5, 4, 3, 2, and current. And I think we could maybe look and make it like 3, 2, 1 or 5, 3, 1 and just kind of narrow that down a little bit. So
Maybe like 5, 3 and current.
yeah, but then we're able to see if organizations are growing, and I think that's where that current number of people served. But are we seeing people adapt to the workplace changes? I mean, we've had to become more efficient. Are other places becoming more efficient?
What's the importance of 5 and 4?
I just
Far
went back.
out.
I just, our numbers show 10 years, Doc. So I just
Okay.
randomly went with 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Thank you.
So,
And I'd probably put a specific date on there so that
okay,
people can't kind of,
okay.
5 years ago was 20,
Mhm.
you know, G16.
Yeah.
So in
July
2016 of
1st, 20
July, we had this many, but
Yeah.
then in December, we cut everybody, you know,
That's
so.
a good idea.
So I can
Put
put like
exact
June
date
of 2016 or January and just define the date. And we'll cut back from 5 to 3. And that way we just have it. Do we need to go back 5 years, or is 3, 2 and current enough? Or what do you guys think?
I like 5-3 current.
Okay.
More of a trend.
Yeah.
That kind of avoids the
Mhm.
COVID thing
Yeah.
too.
That throws it out a little bit.
And I'll probably throw that question on number of people served, and maybe something similar on the very bottom of that. I've got that underlined and italicized. The next is total financial request breakdown by different department areas, program services that. So we want to ask them, how much money are you asking for the county? But then we want you to tell us, where's that money going? So that's where the service program, it could be departments, et cetera. They would tell me, this program, it's going to get this much money, which is this percentage. And one of the new things we talked about was throwing in, what's going to be your quantifiable outcome? We're not going to be asking for this all the time, but what are you hoping to accomplish with that money? And one of our questions could be the next year when we talk to them, hey, you told us in this program, this is what you were hoping to happen. Did you make it happen? This way, when John talks about, does it meet the public need? This is our way to say, hey, we want you to kind of quantify this with an outcome, an objective measure. And we're not going to be asking for reports or data measurements because we don't have time to do it. But I think it's important that people think about, hey, we do have county dollars we're using, and there is going to be an end result that's positive. So any questions in that area? And then we've also added in there, are any in that specific program or that area, are there any specific mandates that you have to follow to meet? Or is there any unfunded mandates? So maybe there's something you have to do through a rule or regulation, but you're not funded to do it. We thought it was important for people to be able to identify, hey, we have to meet this perspective, but we're not funded to do it all. And we've all seen unfunded mandates in different organizations and things we've all been in. So yes, Mary.
And then where do we get into the contracts? Mr. De Leon, maybe you can help us with this. And where do we get into the contracts, MOUs or joint powers things? Could we put a column there? Do you have an MOU, a joint agreement or a contract with the county?
You can, that's up to you if you'd like to have that as one of your check boxes.
And I think that could be one of the end parts of this group is, what do the contracts start to look at? We can make a presentation to the group, or maybe we start looking at that as a commission as a whole. But what do we want those contracts? Do we want people reporting financials? Do we want them giving us more money quarterly? And I think that's something we can eventually get to that conversation with. But I think that's a little bit down the road.
But it could just be another column here, just to make us aware of it. Do you have one with it?
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mary. The next section is more narrative based. And some of the questions we asked were, what effect would the following budget requests and I guess budget awards have on your the services you provide? In your response, please focus on services provided rather than the direct number of staff affected, even though there is a correlation. But what would a 10% reduction do to your organization, a 30% reduction, and a 50% reduction? And I think that gives us a view as a commission. If we cut them, what's it going to look like? What are they going to serve, and what do we see as important? Next one is, what is your organizational sustainability plan? What plans do you have in place to continue providing services without county funding or with a reduction in county funding? 2, why are you asking for funding from the county? What other funding sources have you looked at, into, and or attempted to obtain? And 3, are the services you provide required by a mandate? And this was just a place for them to explain the last one in there more than anything. So I guess looking at this as a whole, are we missing any questions we need to ask outside entities to kind of know what they're doing, keeping it simple, keeping it flowed into a format with not a ton of redundant information that we need to know to make decisions on how and who we fund? And I know there could be some dissemination to this, and you may be, hey, you know what, we're missing this, and that we can definitely add it as we continue to work. But we want to be able to provide a base piece to you guys today, specifically Commissioner Shanefield, Commissioner Smith, and Commissioner Wendling, of where we're at and some of the questions we think are important to get to that base of information to be able to successfully determine who to give funding to. So general thoughts.
I'm going to jump in just because I have to hop off for another meeting at 4:30, but I think this is a really good place to start. And I'd like to maybe have the opportunity to review it tonight and think about any additional questions. And as you would say, Roy, marinate on it just a little bit and think if there's anything that, maybe is missing or whatever. But I just need to process it. I think it's great though.
And I'll tell you, the committee's been great to work with, and we've really processed a lot of questions and discussion.
Even Mary?
Mostly Mary.
The work, I cannot take the credit. But I think you
Oh,
did a
it's a
good
great
job of
start.
putting together our ideas. And I think, just to answer Lauren's question, I think this is a good format to give to our entities. And then if Bonnie could help us take the items that could be put in a checklist, like maybe you'd have the names of the entities down one side. So if you wanted to fold it under, you could to hide them, and then have a checklist. You get a foundation. The ones that could be answered on a spreadsheet so we can kind of compare them.
Yeah, and I'm anxious to see like a scoring system.
And that will be the next step.
Yeah,
I mean,
how-
that's
how
the
you do
difficult
that.
part. And I
It's
think
gonna be
before we
hard,
get
yeah.
to a scoring system, we can identify the questions. And then the next question outside of you guys, hey, Roy, can we add this question or this question? What are the most important questions we're asking? Which ones deserve the most weight? And how do you vote valid? And that's the hard part. And
You almost said the word validate.
I know.
Well,
Hey
if
guys, I have to hop off.
statutorily-
I'm
And
sorry.
thank you, Lauren.
See you
Just
guys.
send Lauren. Oh,
Yeah.
never mind. Just send an email with any questions you want added or questions you have to Mary and I.
I will. Thank you. Bye.
So, yeah.
So I think we have a good start. I think we, once we get some more feedback from you guys, we're able to marinate on it, like we talk about. I think we can then start working toward printing the form up, putting it to a better format, kind of looking at some of the options Mary's talking about, and then start weighting it. So as you guys would also let me know, what are the most important things we need to know? I mean, do we want to put a greater weight on less cash on hand, or a smaller weight on less cash on hand? Do we want the number of people they serve important? Do we score their objectives? I mean, what are your thoughts there as we complete? That's the hardest part, is how do we complete the weight? And once we do that, we're going to do this for a year and go, man, this didn't work. This is what we got to do different. So remember, it truly is a starting point. And something that Lauren said about the definitions, one of the ideas that Mary had was actually to bring in 3 or 4 to 5 of the outside entities and say, take a look at this and what do you think? Does it make sense? And then we may have to have a workshop and create a face page that says, here is the intention of every question, and explain it to people so they know, because it is a new process. And I do think we do get really good information out of it though.
Very good.
So that's what we have. Is there any other questions for Mary or I, or I have Bonnie here and John here from our committee also.
No, I like it. It's a good start. It's a great start.
So, all right. Well, that's what we have to present today.
Thank you. Okay.
Thanks, Roy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, committee, for
Thanks for seeing
your
us.
work.
Yeah.
Continue working on what next steps for this will be. Just working towards finalization as well as a scoring sheet, right?
Yeah, I think,
What do you anticipate as a timeline for that?
well, last time I gave us a very ambitious timeline of 2 weeks, and I don't know if I'll do that again. But I think we can say, I think we can have a more polished product probably in the next couple of weeks, and then maybe 1 month out with the scoring system, because I think that's going to take a lot of banter between the four of us. But I think we can make a goal to have a final product within a month, including scoring project and having a prettier form than Roy's chart at 10:40 at night. So if we want to meet again, whenever in the next couple of weeks to kind of take a look at it, and we can maybe start just showing the scoring methods a little bit, but also I think your feedback is really important of what questions deserve the most weight. And I think I'm really going to have to rely on Bonnie and especially Christina with their experience and the financial side, and especially Christina with the grant side. She probably has more experience than the weighted concept and what's, important. But a lot of that too is us as a 5 commission, what's the most important questions to you and what we're providing money for. So I think that's also there. And then that may change commission to commission too. So, but I think we can get to a base start.
Hold on.
No words of wisdom, but I am impressed with the effort. I mean, I think this was very inclusive. I think the draft, I haven't seen it, but just based on the discussion, I think it's going to answer a lot of the questions and that you guys are going to have. You'll have the answers before they step in front of you. The scoring system is going to be critical, but I do think you're on the right track. Initially, you had talked about elected officials in this as well. I don't know if this is going to apply to them as well,
No.
or if that discussion's come up yet. Okay.
No, we've already weighted the assessors department, the least important, and they
Number one, we're number one.
that was a dictatorship decision by the marinator. No,
Perfect.
I know this really, and there's even questions how well this truly works with even the component agency. It does work. It was really the base start really started with the outside entities, because one of the things that Chairman Wendling has talked about is, and I feel like I'm talking to you and like I'm a speech and debater where you only can look straight forward and not look someone in the face, was when we started talking about this, really to get to the budget, it should be, was it cost to do core government? What are capital costs? What are operational costs? Then the leftover is really where the outside entity money come from. And I quote you decently, Doc, and so really this is to help provide information to disseminate where that last pot of money goes. So, and Dave, I didn't make that executive decision quite yet, but I will sleep on it and marinate on it.
We'll
So,
talk later.
okay.
Yeah, I would say for core government, which is elected officials and departments, we continue with what we had in the past, and this is more. And I was really glad to see it. And as I look through it, it truly is helpful for component units as well,
Mhm.
and that type of thing. And so I
Chairman
think it'll
Wendell?
work. Go ahead.
Oh.
Go ahead.
It might be good though, just to have some key questions for the department heads and the elected officials. How many employees did you have, full-time, part-time, the last 3, 5
Yeah.
currently?
And I have that chart from HR. I can
Yeah,
send that.
HR's got that. We've
I
got
have
all
the
that
chart that
information.
says that.
Great. Just didn't want to let them off
Yeah.
the hook totally.
Well, and a lot of that is dictated through the HR department and that type of thing and that, but you're exactly right. It'd be nice to know. So, okay, next steps then, I think for today, one of our goals was to get through this. Was there anything else?
This was the biggest piece there. I know the other thing we started talking about was coming up with some semblance of order of how we wanted to talk to people. And I don't know if we're quite there yet until we're a little farther on this forum, but if we want to start by talking to department heads first, coming up with that plan and working there was our next piece of discussion, I think.
Okay. Where do you think we're at, commissioners?
I think we could set an order. I don't know if we could set a time, like a date
Yeah.
yet, but we could probably set an order that we'd like to see people.
Okay.
But I think Roy's already laid it out. You've already laid it.
Yeah.
I think it's the order in which we're, granting dollars. So start with elected official core and just work our way out. I don't think it's that
Yeah.
difficult.
And that's what we normally do is we just start with departments
Start with departments
and
and
then Or start with electeds. I don't care.
electeds, departments, and that could even be
Yeah.
intermingled if we wanted to. And then go to components and then finish with the outside entities. And I think one of the nice things this form does as we talk out loud is last year we all went and talked to 4 to 5 outside entities to get a better picture of their organization. I think this form helps ask a lot of those questions we were asking those organizations. So it provides us all that same information too.
Well, it's the same question. Same question. It's, because I know each of us asked same question in a different way and
Mhm.
got 10 different answers. So yeah, I think the order's there pretty well for us because that's where our responsibility is for funding.
And I think the last piece would be the order we saw the outside entities. And I think that's something we can just say we're going to see the outside entities last, but I think we could prioritize who we need to see in the order we think, because one of the things, and I actually have a really cool chart that I will send from Bonnie that I forgot to bring that kind of broke out the outside entities into a nice way that it said, like, these are the entities we don't have a choice but to fund, like guardian ad litem, a public defender, Title 25. Here are your your joint powers boards that you have to fund. Which ones can, and she actually listed which one of these organizations may not have a mill levy, but are actually eligible for a mill levy. We had a really interesting conversation about mill levies one day, and we're surprised with some of the organizations. So I will get that chart to you guys too. But I think as we look at some of those outside entities, some of those entities we're set to fund it no matter what.
Well, yeah,
And maybe we see them first because they're less variable to that.
yeah, and you're exactly right. That falls into that component unit outside entities that fall right after our department heads or departments. Go ahead, Mary.
Well, if Bonnie could help us, I think that was a good order you had for the side of our graph. And then just figure out what questions you can put in on a checklist or a dollar amount off of here, that which ones could be summarized onto a spreadsheet.
Like how much we have to fund? Is that what you're saying?
No, these questions right here, how many of them
Oh.
could be put on the spreadsheet, but use that list of required joint powers, that one you gave us last time, as our side list, and then go across the page with the questions that can be put into a checkbox or a dollar amount square. And then the other questions, we'll just have to read them or attach them. What do you think?
I think that would work. And I'll be honest, I was trying to get Joe's email to send him that last piece. So I
got a question for Bonnie. Bonnie, just on your list of joint power boards, do you have joint telecommunications?
I don't have joint, I have the Rock Springs, Green River, Sweetwater County Combined Communications Joint
Okay.
Power. Is that the one you're talking
No,
about?
no. There's
The
another one.
telecommunications ones? No, I don't, because we do not.
All right,
fund
you gotta make sure you put that on your list because it's a joint board that we just became members of in the last, well, I would say year. I would say.
Are we gonna fund that?
If there's funding requirements, that's part of that. The answer will be yes.
So they should be added to my list because
They should be at least on the list, but I don't know if there's any funding. I think Lauren is the on that board.
Okay, because this is just a list of fund, like who we fund.
Yeah, and who we have funded is your list, as well as who we're gonna fund.
This is a list of who we have historically funded.
All right, so
If there is anyone that needs to be added that we are going to fund in the
there
future, I
could be
can
a
add that.
possibility we could have to fund joint communication, joint telecommunications. But we
Okay,
don't, right, at this point in time, until we talk with Lauren or Tim Knight, or I won't know what that may involve. I know we just became a part of it, but we had some in-kind based on the MOU a while back, but I don't know where it's going to come for funding. I'm just putting an alert out there, that's all.
okay, well, I will need
Yeah,
some contact information to get him a funding request form if
Might-
that is something.
yeah,
that
make
we're
sure-
gonna-
make sure you talk with Lauren.
Okay,
Thank you.
So I think that covers our order. And I
Yeah.
think the question then becomes, how many do we want to see a night? And the nice thing about department directors and elected officials, it's not as many, but when we start looking at the outside entities, when we try to see every entity in 2 days, I think it's a
No.
killer on all of us. I think you become lack of effective because you just hear so many requests, and that the more we can spread that out with fewer numbers,
I think,
even though it requires more meetings, I think it's more effective for us.
I think that was decided when we
Okay.
started this process, why we're having the workshops as often as we are. And if we have to have them more often, I believe we said we would, so that we could be more effective as we do this rather than jam it all in and finally say to heck with it, let's go home. So yeah, I think, yeah, I agree. At least I do. I'd rather spend more time and do a really, really good thorough job, take a little more time. That's my thoughts. I thought we all agreed on that. I could be wrong.
I think you're right, Doc. So. But that's what I have. I think what we have listed for tonight.
Okay. So then as we move forward, as I look ahead, in the near future would be the finalizing of the sheet and reviewing it, seeing, also thinking about what's missing, and we'll all look at that. Am I correct?
Correct.
And then a little longer down the road is the scoring sheet, hopefully a rough draft. And then sometime at that point in time, I'm going to say that's about 4 weeks out, we begin to have people come in, but we need to get the forms out to them. Is that correct?
We want to maybe do like a focus group, maybe if our goal is to have the final product on December 15th, we do the focus group between December 15th and January 1st to kind of finalize that process. And then have a meeting at the beginning of January with all the outside entities saying, here's a new form, and explain it to them.
Keep in mind after the 15th, it's a lot of holidays. And then,
I know.
okay. I mean, people will start wanting to.
Yeah,
do
we may
things.
have to look at that differently, but
All right. So
I just want to keep us on a stream timeline, Doc, so
Yeah.
we get it done.
no, I agree. And the only way we can do that is if we take a look ahead and just really take a look at dates.
Well, they'll put it on their phone anyway.
So when I
They fill out their-
pull this little scheduler out, right now, we've been kind of going the first and third Monday. If I remember correctly, we decided Mondays were good. Am I right, Commissioner Smith?
That was, yeah.
And at 4:00, right?
Mhm.
All right, so
Or 4:30
what'd you say?
or 4:30.
Or 4:30, whatever
on
works
Mary.
for you.
I might miss the meeting.
I
You don't
know.
make up your mind.
Yeah, and I'll get here early. So, so my question would be, do you want to go 4:30 or 6 or 4:30 or 4?
4:00.
4
Yeah,
o'clock,
let's leave
okay.
it at 4 because
Fine with
this-
me.
like me might get confused.
All right, we're gonna stay at 4:00. Are we going to, we're gonna stay on Mondays. So are we gonna go the first and third Monday? Which is the Mondays before our commissioner meetings? I like it.
I
Fine
do.
with me.
Huh?
I think that can work.
All right, so then when I look at this, our next meeting will be December the 6th. December the 20th. We cannot meet on the, so help me out a little bit. The 1st of January,
3rd of January.
yeah, would be the 3rd. So the 1st, though, New Year's Day will be celebrated on Friday. All right, so we'd go the 3rd of January,
Mhm.
17th of January, and ongoing, the 1st and 3rd Monday of every month at 4:00, unless it falls on a holiday. That fair enough?
Well, maybe we could say like electeds, January, department heads.
We'll get to
February, or-
that next. We'll get to that when we get down the road here in 2 to 4 weeks. We're not going to, I don't believe we want to schedule people at this point in time unless our forms are ready. Or are they ready?
Well-
Or,
I haven't done anything with the internal side, but I don't think we have to
well,
do
we
a lot
don't have
different.
to because it's a matter of us just sending out and
Yeah.
are they ready to do their budgets?
Mhm.
That's when that works, Mary, I apologize.
Yeah,
You haven't done this before.
right.
You know it. What'll happen is Bonnie will send out requests notifying them to do their budgets to the departments and electeds. They'll do their budgets and everything, present them to Bonnie. Bonnie will put them all together, and then we'll sit down with them.
When
Does
does
it-
that normally
Well,
happen?
normally that happens in, Bonnie, help me out.
Usually in April, their funding requests are due. And then I usually present the request to the board. That's a statutory requirement that I'm required to do by May 15th. So historically, I have done that the first meeting in May, the first commissioner meeting in May. I know at times we have moved that up. I think it was 2 years ago, we moved it up to the second meeting in April that was presented, so we could have a little bit more time. But that can be whenever you want. It just has to be done by the 15th of May. And that meeting date, that first meeting in May is historically driven the schedule for when we schedule everything.
Let's just, let me think about this. Jump in thinking about the process. As we work with our component units and outside agencies, they can submit these forms. We can look at them and score them and then notify them of their award dollars anytime after they present to us. It doesn't have to be said that quick. So there's would be nothing wrong to bring them in early. And here's the reason. A number of them get funding from the cities and other agencies, and they will have to have their budgets done shortly after the first year. Because some of them, because the city I know requires it done sooner, so they haven't finished. So some of the outside agencies could fill these in. Component units could do these. As far as our elected and our department chairs or departments, Bonnie could send those out nearly that early date, tabulate them all. Then we can sit down and review them, do the departments, electeds, and then notify component units and outside agencies of what their funding will be. So just think of that process. What do you think? Go ahead,
Chairman,
Mary.
would there be any value though in just having one of these meetings to visit with electeds and department heads?
You want to bring them?
Not about their specific budget, but say, what do you see is different from what you've been doing? Do you have to have a new computer system or something that we need to
Would-
be aware of, that they are going to be changing their budget up or down because of something?
A lot of some of that stuff, keep in mind, will go through capital, go through Tim. So we'll have that information when we do capital. When any conversations that we want to have with them as a group, we can involve them when we do the focus group. We can talk, and that type of thing. We can have a separate work with those if we need to, but as we work through the process, we can call those in, Commissioner.
I was just thinking to get
Yeah, it's-
ahead of the curve, so we're not jamming everything into April and May. If we could start kind of getting a heads up from some of the
I'm
entities in
telling you-
January, February, March.
telling you right now, we're ahead of the curve. Or I feel so much further ahead. I don't know about the other three, from,
Mary, I feel like we're light years ahead of where we have been. I mean, because truly, if the first 3 years I've been on commission, what it feels like is we get the information, we really listen to people the last week of May and June, and by the second meeting in June, we're making the budget, and we've only really, and the biggest thing is, I don't think we've ever really, we listen to organizations, but we never really talk about the requests, it's just that we don't disseminate it out. So I think this allows for that last couple of weeks to be more of that dissemination process after we've heard of everything. So I will tell you, I think having more time to look it through and value it out, comparatively the last 3 years, this is significantly more time than we've ever done.
the key to it,
Mhm.
the whole thing and meeting what we're talking about, staying ahead of it will be the work that's been done for today, and that'll be done for the next two meetings.
Yep.
That will be so key. So if that's in place by the first of the year, we come back after first year, you know, we can send this out
Mhm.
to those and start setting up when we want them to come in, Commissioner Coleman. Then we can meet with departments and electeds anytime,
Mhm.
really. We don't, you know,
And I think if we're able to disseminate where we think we need to be with them, it makes it a lot easier to figure out what we need to do with the components and the outside entities once that's figured out.
Because
So-
then we're putting our cores as our priority funding.
Mhm.
oh, yeah, yeah.
And
I
then we're
think
working our way down as
Mhm.
based
Yeah,
on
if
where
you
the money.
visualize
Mhm,
personnel, part of the budget, operations,
mhm.
and then we subtract that amount from what we have for revenue. Then we take a look at our capital, what it is we're gonna fund with capital. Then we come into our component using outside agencies. There's going to be a pot of money left over, but to fund capital, component units and outside agencies to what level will be determined by the cash carryover
Mhm.
and what we want to spend out of reserves. And then also, which in many ways I hear in the conversation of soft money. But from the careful aspect of if we're trying to shrink that can, so we don't kick it down the road of that deficit between reserves and, or not reserves, but expenses and revenues, we've got to not only shrink that can, but we got to make sure we don't do anything that's going to
Right.
expand it.
And maybe one of our meetings of budget, Chairman Wendling, can be having Christina just make a presentation about the ARPA funding and rules, regulations, and concepts within that to discuss that.
We need to have that, and as soon as that's all determined, we need to have that in a
Absolutely.
regular meeting for
Okay,
the public as well. So,
agreed.
yeah, I wouldn't lean that particular piece, very similar to what's on the agenda tomorrow for the immunization piece that's going to be presented. Those are pieces that need to be not only kept us update, but the community as well. And there's more community paying attention to our board meetings and workshops. So, you know, and that type of thing. And we're all present for board meetings. So right now, as I hear it, we'll be able to establish, at least I will say through, I'm going to stretch out the end of May. First and third Mondays tied up unless the holiday for a workshop starting at 4 o'clock, no more than an hour and a half, less than that if we can.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, if we get to 5:30, I get to get out the button and push it. We don't want to hear what the button says.
Yeah.
Okay, but anyhow, yes, David, it's one I had in high school that was on the tables, you know it. So with that, we'll plan on that next meeting, somewhat of a final update.
Yep.
Okay, so also to set that agenda, what else would you like on that meeting, commissioners?
I think the big thing from my perspective would be just the finalization of, you know, the basically the second to last draft of this form, and any final input from the entire group would be the most important thing. And then maybe we start putting names to dates of who we're seeing when, so they can start preparing.
Well, yeah, and Bonnie can send the forms out
Yep.
if when they're ready. I'd like to be able to take the form the next time and go through it a little more
Yes.
in depth. Just kind of look at it. Just, I don't want to miss anything.
Yep.
And I would certainly encourage any input that might be missed.
Absolutely. And that's, like I said, I think the next biggest thing in this process is you guys see things as you marinate to make sure you send it to us so we can figure that out and add that in. So,
Okay. Commissioner Toman.
Well, I think it would be good if we could have that kind of that graph thing as well as this ahead of time to each of us. So when we get here on the 6th, we kind
Well-
of can have our ideas and be ready to move forward.
and I think the nice thing is we actually, because we're going on the 1st, we actually have 3 weeks before we have the next meeting rather than 2. And to remember, to even get to this committee, we actually set our first meeting to be 1 hour after our last commission meeting. So we didn't even have our first meeting until after our commission meeting, and we met from about 4:45 to 6:15
Then
after
tonight-
that commission meeting. So I mean, we were on a time frame to get to where we were today. So I think having that extra week, especially knowing we are at Thanksgiving week and holiday weeks, I think it's beneficial.
Well, and also the timeline also allows us, if we see a glitch, we can stop and get it fixed.
Absolutely.
Okay, with that, any more to come before us? Okay, next meeting, December 6th, right here. And we'll have same setup and we'll go from there. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I
So
will-
move.
I'll
Commissioner
second that.
Tillman.
Oh.
No, Commissioner Tillman,
I'll second her. then.
second by Commissioner Lloyd to adjourn. All those in favor?